Why do humans hate immortality so much? I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but there's a weirdly common trope where some character attains immortality, and it turns out that that experience is only briefly enjoyable, followed by eternal suffering. Groundhog Day, Logan, Blade Runner, even Twilight all touch on the burden of immortality. Each of them obviously have to resolve in some way, and so they each present their own solutions to the experience of immortality. But there's one movie and one TV show that I really want to call attention to because I think they address this concept most directly, and that is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and The Good Place. The Good Place is very interesting because it takes this concept further than anyone else. It points out that even if you lived forever, literally in heaven, it would be terrible. It's a sort of beautiful reflection on the fact that mortality lends purpose to the events of our life. The fact that time is a limited resource for humans actually means that the decisions we make are much more meaningful. So the solution that Chidi comes up with in The Good Place is that at any point you can end your time in heaven by walking through a door that disintegrates you into dust. This to me is a slightly inelegant solution. It's more of a cop-out because you still functionally have infinite time to do anything you want. My subjective experience of Chidi's version of heaven would be that I would get there and enjoy it for a day, maybe two, and then walk through the door. Which is what brings us to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a movie where Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet play characters who fall in love with each other, but discover that they are in an infinite loop. Their love has a habit of playing out in a terrible way, and so they keep going to this sci-fi facility where they can wipe their mind clean and start all over again. Perhaps what this says is that a better solution to Chidi's problem with heaven would be amnesia. If you could just relive your mortal existence without knowing you were secretly part of some sort of immortal loop, you would get to experience a meaningful life. However, in Eternal Sunshine, the two main characters run into a problem, which is that they end up repeating the same bad habits and their relationship falls apart in the same way over and over again. I would argue that is because they are deeply unhealthy people. They are not just in love with each other, they are fetishizing each other as a total solution to their happiness. They want to live through the early phases of a romantic relationship where everything is exciting, and as soon as they get to the difficult part, they abandon it. So, someone who's pessimistic might say that the mind erase tool in this movie is a terrible one, but more optimistically, you could view it that if you were a more healthy person, you could actually utilize it in a positive and effective way. You could literally right now be living an immortal life in the good place and just not remember it. It's hypothetically possible, but it begs a different question, which is that if this were heaven, why does everything suck so much? As a side note, this is a deeper theological question than just if we live in heaven. Even if we don't live in heaven, if there is any form of higher design, call it God, call it whatever you want, there's this question of why has our reality been designed in such a difficult way? And why doesn't the higher designer intervene in some of the more terrible atrocities of this existence? Well, to answer this, I actually want to turn to a comic book, which is Superman Red Son. Superman Red Son tells the story of Superman landing in communist Russia instead of the United States. This communist Superman grows up to essentially rule the entire world, but in a good way. He creates a nearly perfect utopia. However, the big conclusion is that although he created utopia, he took away humanity's agency, the ability of humanity to make their own mistakes. If we view Superman as God here, which is what he often symbolizes, we could say that it is not God's job to intervene in the challenges of our world, because in fact, that intervention would devalue our agency and the opportunity we have to make the best of a terrible situation. Returning all the way back to Groundhog Day, I think the very interesting thing is that if you watch this movie, Bill Murray is not immediately depressed when he discovers he's in an infinite loop. At first he's confused, but then he comes to terms with it, and has a lot of fun. He slowly becomes depressed once he runs out of ideas for what to do with his time. And I think what that shows is that the truly depressing thing about immortality is that it is predictable. Imagine if there was just a sliver of a doubt in Bill Murray's mind about what was coming next. If there was just a chance that something random could happen, that he could escape the loop, then I think he would actually be happy again. I think in order to be happy, you actually need to be uncertain. And not just if you are atheistic. Imagine if we were absolutely certain that there was one specific God. Let's say it's Christian God. I think the entire Catholic Church would be out of a job. What would your purpose be as a cardinal or a pope if everyone knew for sure that God existed? The clergy is an advertisement for a religion. And if we knew that God existed, having a clergy would be like advertising tap water. It's already a given. So, weirdly enough, no matter what theistic perspective you come from, you actually need to have doubt in order to find purpose in your worldly goals. The real reason humans hate immortality is because it is the doubt killer. I think stories about immortality teach us to embrace the non-definitive nature of our lives. However, movies need to end, and endings call for a sense of finality. So any movie that deals with the concept of immortality is forced to put a button on it in a way that doesn't actually philosophically line up. But that's fine. In fact, it's beautiful. At the end of Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's character is not left stressing about why he got stuck in that time loop. He doesn't ask if God was behind it or any deep philosophical questions. He just accepts the lesson he learned from that experience and moves forward, which is how life works. It doesn't have a big finale. It just keeps going until it suddenly doesn't. Just like this YouTube video.